I was just getting more and more worn down and more depleted, and I was needing more and more time to recover in between. And I
Mhm.
started to become unbelievably like reclusive and almost agoraphobic to the point of if I'm not actively participating in my next thing, I have to just be in my house, lights off, special interest show on the TV, and just like not able to really function or participate in this life that I've built.
There is something quietly exhausting about living in a world that only knows how to measure you by what you produce. How many things did you finish today? How many followers? How many deals? How much output? For neurodivergent people, that pressure does not just wear you down. Research is increasingly showing it can actually push your nervous system into full collapse. And nobody talks about what that actually looks like from the inside. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Vibe with Kai podcast. My name is Kairos Keenan Westcott. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Patrick Casale, a licensed clinical mental health therapist, neurodivergent business coach, TEDx speaker, retreat host, and podcast host that is based in Asheville, North Carolina. Patrick is AuDHD, meaning he is both autistic and ADHD, and he found that out after already building an entire career. He runs a group therapy practice, coaches other therapists and entrepreneurs on pushing through self-doubt and perfectionism. And on top of that, he leads international retreats, which is pretty cool. Now, from the outside, it looks like a dream, but Patrick has been remarkably open about how all of this success that he's experienced actually dug him into a deeper hole, one that eventually put him in the hospital. If you want to go deeper about his work and his insights on AuDHD and neurodivergence, go check out his podcast, check out his website, check out his social channels. All of those links are in the show notes of this episode. And if what Patrick and I talk about today is hitting close to home, my Patreon and Facebook subscriptions exist for that exact feeling. For $5 a month, you get access to my full ADHD deep dive library, exclusive neurodivergent content, and insights that you won't find anywhere else. And as a little bonus, Patrick and I also recorded a reverse the mic segment where he put me in the hot seat and asked me some questions that I genuinely was not ready for. And I loved every second of it. All of that is waiting for you. Just subscribe. It's only $5 a month. Subscribe on Patreon and on Facebook. Those links are in the show notes as well. Also, quick note before we get started, this episode does contain some strong language. So if that is not your thing, no judgment at all. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that there is some strong language in this episode, okay? All right, now let's get into it. My friends, sit back, relax, and enjoy my chat with Patrick Casale. What's going on, friends? I'm sitting here with my friend Patrick Casale. What's up, man? How are you?
What's going on? Saturday morning. It's raining here,
I
so
know.
can't complain.
Where are you based out of again?
I'm in Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's raining here too. I'm right outside of Philly.
Okay.
And I feel like the weather needs to make up its mind. Because it was like 95 degrees earlier this week for me, and then all of a
Here
sudden
too.
it's now 55 and rainy.
I'll be honest. I would love to live in Ireland or somewhere where it's 55 and rainy all the time.
Really?
That's
You
my
know what? You're
ideal
the second
situation.
person to say that to me recently. Like I was talking to somebody else. They went to Paris, France, and they were saying that they like a cooler climate. I can't
Yep.
do it, man. Give me the summer, give me the hot sun.
I anything above 70 and I start to, like, literally experience a meltdown, and,
Oh
I
man.
realize with, like, POTS and dysautonomia and MCAS and hypermobility, a
Yeah,
lot of the things that come along with the autistic ADHD experience, heat intolerance, man, like, I
that makes
can't do the
sense.
heat. I just can't do
Yeah.
it. Summertime can be very lonely.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel you there. I think it's my family's from Arizona, so I think that played a role,
Sure. Yeah.
for me. I like that heat for sure. Patrick, thank you for hanging out with me today, man. You've built this entire empire of therapy practices, retreats, podcasts, yet I found very interesting. You talk very openly about how all of this success actually dug you into a deeper hole.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have to ask, how do you balance running things like the Neurodivergent Entrepreneur podcast while acknowledging that this very hustle that you do contributed to your burnout?
It's a great question. I have a quick divergent thought. Do you follow Ron Funches at all on Instagram or
I
social?
love Ron Funches.
You
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
Ron's stuff where they're like, "How do you do all these things?" And he's like,
He's like,
"I
I
don't.
don't.
I'm very
Yes.
tired."
Yes.
That's what immediately came to mind. So yeah, I don't, and I think that is the real answer. I've done so much over the last 6 or 7 years, and as a licensed clinical mental health therapist, stuff that I never dreamed about being able to do while sitting in my boring research methods class back in 2014. Like at that time, you think, okay, you have two pathways as a therapist. You're either going to go into community mental health, or maybe eventually you'll start a private practice one day, and that will be that. I had not discovered that I was AuDHD yet. And I had this unrelenting, gnawing experience of restlessness and
Mm.
new ideas and like never feeling satisfied with the current status quo. And I couldn't pinpoint it. And once I got my ADHD diagnosis, I was like, okay, that probably makes sense. That doesn't
Mhm.
solve all the answers for me, though.
Yeah.
And then I found out 5 years later that I'm also autistic. And then I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But my career had already taken off and it felt like a runaway train at that time. I had the All Things Private Practice podcast. I had retreats and summits happening all over the world. I had like speaking engagements and coaching programs and all of these things. And I own a group practice and employ 25 therapists. And it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
all of the plates that I kept spinning for so long just started to come crashing down. And I started to realize a couple of years ago, I was hosting a retreat in New Orleans and I had this meltdown moment where I had to go outside and literally like scream at the top of my lungs in the middle of the street. People in New Orleans were just looking at me like, yeah, it's just another day here and whatever. It was a good place to do that. And I had the epiphany moment of like, I have created a dream job that I can't actively participate in.
Interesting. So
And
that was the breaking point for you.
yeah,
That's when you realized the success was actually hurting you.
yeah. And that was in 2023. It's taken a long time to kind of unravel because the way that my career went, my entire year was spoken for before the year even started. It felt very much like the walls were closing in. I would have
Mhm.
retreats or summits planned in different countries and in and out of the United States every month. And transitions, changes, all that energy of like being around people and having to socialize and sometimes have to mask. And I was just getting more and more worn down and more depleted. And I was needing more and more time to recover in between. And I
Mhm.
started to become unbelievably like reclusive and almost agoraphobic to the point of if I'm not actively participating in my next thing, I have to just be in my house, lights off, special interest show on the TV, and just like not able to really function or participate in this life that I've built. And
Yeah.
on the outside looking in on social media, a lot of people would say like, but you have this dream scenario. You're like traveling the world, working and doing all these cool things. I was like, it doesn't feel that way to me. It does not feel that way at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back for a second to something that you said. You were talking about how you were diagnosed about 5 years later autistic. You have these diagnoses now. After you got that final diagnosis, looking back at your life, because like you were older
Yeah.
when this all happened. Looking back at your life now, like what are there things that you realize that just like make sense for your whole life, like as a child, as a young adult, as a young man? Like do are there specific things that stand out to you that you're like, oh shit, I get it now?
So many things, man. Like
Yeah.
I talk about this thing that I call the grief relief paradox a lot, where there's grief for that inner child, that child that grew up without understanding and feeling so different and alone and feeling like it was all my fault. And then there's relief of this like finally everything makes sense. Everything I've been working for 35 years of in and out of therapist office, in and out of psychiatry offices, like really freaking struggling to finally have that answer. And it allows you to completely rearrange your life and look at the world through a different lens, but it doesn't change the day to day. I'm writing a book on late in life autism discovery right now. And one part of that book, I talk about meeting my wife.
Ariel
13
is her name, right?
Yeah,
Ariel?
Ariel. Yep.
Ariel, yeah.
And she's a Black woman from the South. It was a good partnership, a lot of directness in our relationship. And I remember early on in the first date, she was giving me a lot of signs that she wanted me to kiss her. I did not pick up on those signs. I gave her a very awkward,
Mm.
like side hug and kind of like ran off. And she was like, what the fuck? Like I thought this
So
was
you're
good."
awkward like me on dates. So
Oh
you're
yeah.
just like,
I've been in so many situations like woman puts hand on my leg at a bar and I move over because I'm like, oh,
no.
yeah, so I can think of so many moments where just like really picking up on subtle social cues, not my
Yeah.
thing. Can look back at all these moments of like sensory overwhelm. I am very
Mm.
hypersensitive, so I am impacted by everything. I often feel like an exposed nerve ending that is constantly just being shocked in life.
Mm,
So I have to be very aware and protective of how I move through the world, and it's isolating. It's really
yeah.
it can be really lonely.
Were you already married when you got your diagnosis?
Yep, I got
And
my
how did
diagnosis. Sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 please go ahead.
I got my diagnosis back in October 2021.
Mhm.
So that was a little less than 5 years ago. And when I told her, she was like, "Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm not."
I was gonna ask what her reaction was like when you're like,
Mhm.
"Hey, babe, listen."
All this buildup, and I'm just finally like, "Oh my god." And she's like, "Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I didn't
Yeah,
really think otherwise." And I was like,
yeah,
that's news to me." But you asked
yeah.
me about, like, moments that stand out. She has a very big family, and, they all are very close, and they get together a lot, and I would find myself early on in the relationship, like, trying to push through the feelings of overwhelm and couldn't pinpoint why I felt so depleted afterwards and why I felt, like,
Oh, you were
so
masking.
yeah, masking so
Yeah.
heavily, and I would just stop going to family events, and she took it
Mm,
personally at first, like, "How come you don't wanna go to my family's for this holiday or this holiday?" I'm like, "'Cause we're in a 1,000 square foot home with 50 people. Everyone wants
that's a
to talk to me
lot.
at the same time,"
Yeah.
and it was just very overwhelming, and now there's this beautiful understanding where she just tells her family, she's like, "He's way too, like, overwhelmed or burnt out. He's not coming."
Wow. Wow. I I would imagine that after you got your diagnoses, were you able to drop the mask a little bit now that you understood what was happening?
Yeah, good question. Massively. I talk about unmasking a lot, and I used to do so way with this like blinding privilege of like unmask at
Mm,
all costs. Like no matter what you do, unmask as much as possible because that's the only way to get back to your true self. But the realization of a lot of people do not have that privilege to just unmask whenever they want. Like black and brown people, trans people,
mhm.
people with moderate and high support needs, like may not have the privilege to mask at all. And there's real danger associated with unmasking. And I think you have to do so really selectively. But I do think it is really liberating when you are able to be your true authentic self and unmask in social situations with people you care about and have them actually feel like they embrace you and understand you and accommodate you.
Yeah. You often say that living in a capitalist society is a direct recipe for autistic burnout.
Yeah.
And I want to dive into that a little bit because I want to know how do you separate your self-worth from your productivity when your entire career is built pretty much on producing results? How do you separate that?
I did some research, man.
Yeah.
I want to go back to that Ron Funches quote again.
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
in all seriousness, it's a mind fuck, like I've been actively trying really hard to deconstruct what it means to have value as a human and to be worthy. And I grew up, as a lot of people did, with this core belief that I was only as good as my next achievement or my next accomplishment. I didn't get a lot of praise at home. I was always like a high achieving person, whether it was in sports or in school, and things came pretty naturally at an early age. And when success starts to happen and you feel really alone and you feel really different, and you don't already believe that you have self worth, it is addicting. There's a
Mm.
dopamine rush and hit that comes with follower count, comments,
Oh yeah.
engagement, success at selling things out pretty quickly. Like there is an addiction there. And I have a former gambling addiction, and I can see similarities in like how some of that shows up. But I've had to work really hard with my own therapist and just with friends in general about deconstructing what it means to have value as a inherent value as a human. And I believe we all have inherent value, regardless of what we produce and create and put out into the world. But capitalism will certainly skew that belief and say, like, you're lazy if you're not producing.
Yes.
You don't
Yes.
have value or worth if you're not creating. There's something wrong with you. You're not motivated. You just want to live off the system. Like, there's so much shit. And it
Yep.
creates a lot of shame.
Mhm.
And as someone who owns 2 businesses, I have the luxury of saying, I can step back a bit and I don't have to produce if I don't want to right now. I'm in a season where I can slow down. A lot of people do not have that luxury and they have to just grind it out regardless. And I think it just wears you down and just completely just destroys your entire being.
Yeah, I was curious, like, as you were talking, I couldn't help but think, what happens to your body when you are tying your self-worth so closely to your work, like, how did you feel physically?
I feel horrible. I'm 39 and I've been saying,
Same. Oh,
"Oh,
I turned 39 on Tuesday.
okay, happy early
Yeah.
birthday."
Thank you, man.
I'm turning 40 in August, which a
Right
lot of
on.
people would say, like, that's middle age, but I would say I think I've surpassed that a long time ago. I
Interesting.
have felt like I've been a 90-year-old man since I was a kid
Mm,
and could never pinpoint that. But going back to these retreats, so I'll give an example. It was 2024. I was hosting 6 separate retreats, finishing that year off with a summit in this medieval village in Italy. And to give some
mm.
context, I found out that you could rent this entire village and host events there in the middle of
Wow.
the mountaintops of nowhere, Italy. So I was like, I'm going to try to see if I could do this and pull this off.
Yeah.
It's going to be very different than a summit at like a Marriott or a Radisson.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of that, about 18 months of planning and getting that prepared and all the logistics and all the behind the scenes, and it sells out in like 10 days. And I was like, oh shit, I've got to make this
Wow.
happen now. So I kept telling myself that year, just get through Italy. You're already in burnout. You know where you're at. Get through Italy, and you have the rest of the year to rest and relax and restore and really step away. Because a fantasy that a lot of autistic people have, I think, is to disappear. And I want to be
Yes.
clear, not to die, but to disappear. Like the fantasy of going into a cottage or a cabin or just walking into the woods and reducing all of the demands and removing self from all of it. So I was going to treat myself to go to New Zealand for a 2-week Lord of the Rings trip after that. And I was really excited. It was like 3 years in the making. Summit happens, quite successful. I come home immediately in Western Carolina. We get destroyed by Hurricane Helene, like immediately after,
Yes. Yes.
5 days before I was supposed to go to New Zealand. And the rest of the year was just lost at that point. It was just complete trauma response and reaction.
Yeah.
It was a tough time for this area, and I don't think I've ever fully recovered. Going into 25, I thought to myself, I'm gonna finally create some boundaries with this AuDHD, like, tug of war that I experience.
Um,
ADHD wants projects and stimulation and excitement and novelty, and I'm like, I'm only gonna commit to doing things in odd numbered months, and in even numbered months, I'm not gonna do anything, and that does happen. But then
yeah.
I notice, like, I'm starting to get sicker every time I leave the country or every time I travel. I'm starting to injure myself from, like, clumsy
Yeah.
accidents while traveling, almost broke my ankle in Greece, and then
Wow.
ended up at a hospital, then ended up with COVID and all sorts of sicknesses and illnesses over the last few years. Come to discover that I have hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, POTS or postural orthostatic tachycardia, which a lot of people refer to like your autonomic nervous system is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So when you're getting up from laying down, the blood pulls in your legs, your heart starts to beat faster to try to get it up to your brain. You feel like you're going to pass out, fall over, you're dizzy, etc. And then MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. And it's all these things that have been saying, like, screaming to slow down, like something has to give or we're going to make it give. And that's what happened this fall is all of that came to a head. I got super sick on a retreat. I ended up in the hospital, and it was just a very real moment for me to think you have pushed yourself so far beyond your limitations that your body is collapsing and it
Yeah.
can't recover. Because when you're in a heightened sense of stress and anxiety and nervous system deregulation all the time, you're going to start to experience more physical symptoms, more medical experiences, more health conditions. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah. One of the things I really appreciate about you, Patrick, is that you talk about things like your struggles, the things that you're diagnosed with, both physically, mentally. You talk about these things and where you are now, not just as a shiny success story, like I feel like most people do, but you talk about it as a real and raw truth, which is something that I admire because, like, my whole platform, I'm not a big fan of toxic positivity, actively against it.
Yep.
And sometimes people will view that in a negative way for me,
Yep.
because I truly just believe I'd rather talk about the real effect of it and how it affects me and how I'm not a fan of it.
Yep.
So, like, some of the things that I struggle with, but it is what it is. I can control how I react to it and what I do about it. And so it's nice to put a name to these things. And in order to put a name to these things, like the things that you were just talking about, you have to be real. You can't bullshit your way through it.
Yep.
You know, one of my most unpopular opinions that I put out there is I don't think that ADHD or autism are a superpower. I'm not a big fan of when, like, I get why people say that because, sometimes you say what you need to say or for yourself to get through the day because it's hard
Yep.
enough as it is. So like I will
Totally.
never fault anybody for that. But for me personally, I can't call it
Yep.
any of these things a superpower because I feel like that kind of gives it this grandiose, romantic, in
Yep.
a way, feel, which I'm
Yep.
not a fan of. And you end up not being real about it. So with that said, I want to go back to you were talking about your gambling and all of that. Like let's talk about the real raw truth. Do you feel that your undiagnosed ADHD fueled those addictive behaviors before you knew what you were dealing with?
Yep. So a lot to unpack there, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate what you just said because I feel the exact same way. Toxic positivity is not my style. It's never been my jam. I do think, like you said, sometimes we have to say things to get through the day. And I wanna put a pin in that because I actually did
Yeah.
a talk before like I did all this learning and discovering about neurodivergent superpowers and kryptonites as an entrepreneur at a conference. And that's one of the things I regret doing most in my life after learning and unlearning so much. But anyway, I don't want to diverge too much. So yeah, gambling I associate highly with the undiagnosed autistic ADHD experience. And I
Mhm.
I I would say a lot of addiction and substance use. We already know research is already showing higher numbers of addiction in the ADHD population, especially when you're dealing with like recklessness, impulsivity, a brain that needs dopamine. Like there's a lot there in terms of being able to get addicted to something fairly quickly. I
Mhm.
believe wholeheartedly, and there's not as much research on the autistic side, that autistic people and ADHD people, especially those who feel very lonely, who feel very different, who feel very isolated, who feel very awkward, there's a reliance on substances to help fit in, as there is with any peer group. But
Sure.
even more so when you're working through that masking and that sensory sensitivity and the struggles in social situations. Because I know for myself, and I talk about this publicly all the time, my friend group was not a good one growing up. And we started drinking, 12, 13 years old, pretty heavily
Mhm.
throughout our high school years. And then my drinking turned to gambling. And I have a family history of gambling addiction. And, it would start pretty small. It would start pretty like insignificant. And then it started to escalate fairly quickly to like dangerous levels of putting myself in really bad situations,
Sure.
getting involved with really bad people, doing some things that I am not proud about, and suffering in that space for almost 12 years of my life. And I do think there was a part of it that was like, this helps me not be embodied.
Mm.
It helps me not have to deal with the internal suffering and struggling that I have on a daily basis that I could never put a name to. And it helped me just dissociate from things and disconnect completely. And then it became so problematic that it just completely fucking consumes you
Sure.
to the point where, like, growing up in upstate New York and going to college in upstate New York, we had two casinos within an hour's drive. I did some reckless shit, man. Like, there were
Mhm.
nights where there were blizzards in northern New York, and I was like, I'm going to the casino anyway. I don't care. I'm going to drive
Yeah.
100 miles an hour through the back roads of upstate New York. I would get pulled over. I would like lose an enormous amount of money. I went down the road of like, should I try to rob a bank? Should I try to rob a
Wow.
convenience? Like, I was so desperate. It was so bad. And you start to push everybody away that cares
Yeah.
about you because they see you and they want to help, but you don't want to admit that to yourself. I think the hardest part about addiction, in my opinion, is knowing that you're addicted and how damaging and destructive it is, but not being able to stop. And I think that's what a lot of people don't get is that realization where it's like, I know I'm destroying myself and I can't do anything about it.
Right.
And I do think that having the AuDHD neurotype played a role because we already know that autistic and ADHD people are going to experience more trauma in life. We
Sure.
already know that we're going to be dealing with nervous systems that are often dysregulated.
Mhm.
And I think that all compounds into a situation where you start to reach for things that are not healthy, but they're short term fixes. They're band aid fixes. They make you feel a
Mhm.
little bit better
Yeah.
to get through that day. And then it becomes so problematic that you don't know how you got in it in the first place. And I thought about that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
I
was a, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
No, no, I was just gonna say, I appreciate you telling that story because it takes a lot of courage to share that aspect of your life and not only share what happened, but share a self-reflective view on it. And I know this is gonna sound freaking cliche of a question, but I am very curious. If you could talk to yourself during those moments, like during the blizzard when you're like, I'm going to the casino, what would you say? Like if the today you was talking to then you, what
Yeah.
would you say?
I would just say that it's okay to feel as lost as you do and as that you're not broken, that it's not a you problem, that there's no reason to suffer in silence like this all the time. I vividly remember being 25 years old and thinking I'm not going to live to 30. And I thought that
Mhm.
was very real at that time. And that you deserve recovery, you deserve to heal, you deserve to work through these things because these are just, what is the word I'm looking for? Side effects or the aftermath of living in a very traumatized body and mind for so
Mhm.
long without the right support that it had to come out somewhere. And it didn't, it was always going to end negatively for me if I didn't change my situation. I was
Yeah.
a criminal justice major in college for some reason. I don't know why. I don't want anything to do with law enforcement in general, but I think it was because one of my, I'll just use trigger warnings here, but one of my best friends died by suicide when I was a freshman in college.
Mhm.
And I was a psychology major at the time, but all of the friends that I had were criminal justice majors. And I was like, I'm switching. I want path of least resistance. Like I can't
Yeah.
function. And I remember like so many moments, including where we went to a field trip in upstate New York to Dannemora Maximum Security Prison. And there was this group of inmates in prison, people in prison who were, they were trying this new thing where nobody was isolated. Everyone was working on like a support circle basically and community. And I fell asleep sitting in that group. And because I had been up all night playing poker at an underground poker room. And the guy next
Mhm.
to me tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "This is not where you want to fall asleep, man. You need to
Right.
wake up." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But I would put myself in situations like that all the time.
Yeah. So after all of this whole entire journey, what does a bad day look like for you now?
More so now, it's the psychological and physical pain
Yeah.
I experience with like being being autistic ADHD for myself has been a really hard journey. It has felt very lonely and very isolating, even when surrounded by people who I know care about me. It can feel really hard to access. And I often spend a lot of my time in my own inner world, in my head, like consumed by really deep existential thoughts. But add in all the chronic pain issues, the hypermobility, like there are nights where my pain is so bad that my joints hurt so bad that I can't get comfortable enough to sleep a single minute. There's grief in acknowledging that with chronic pain and chronic illness, you cannot be a consistent, predictable human being. I
Yeah.
will make plans with the best of intentions and we'll get to that day. And maybe I didn't sleep the night before. Maybe my pain is at a 9 or a 10. Maybe I'm just really struggling and I have to bail. It can really make friendships hard if you're not surrounded by the right people. I can't rely on myself to do things that I used to be able to do. Used to be a college athlete and play soccer like 5 days a week. And now I might dislocate my ankle walking through our house. And
Mhm.
I feel like my body is betraying me. And that's
Mhm.
kind of how it feels pretty regularly, trying desperately to like alleviate by going to specialists, going to different doctors, going to different appointments, trying all of these different things. And then for a lot of people with invisible illness or and chronic pain issues, it's a really isolating, exhausting life because that
Yeah.
pain takes up a lot of mental energy on a daily basis. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there will be
How does
days.
how does your dog help? Your dog Hudson, I'm sure, plays a role in helping you feel a little bit better throughout your day, I'm sure.
Yeah, man. If you come on my podcast, I'm gonna have to deep dive as much as you did. I
Oh,
feel like when
absolutely.
people go on Hot Ones and Sean Astin knows like everything about their career, I'm always like blown away.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why real quick. It's because I also do like a lot of podcasts. I get interviewed a lot. My biggest pet peeve is
Hmm.
when I go on a podcast and they didn't do like a little bit of research. It's just kind of like
Yeah.
by the books,
Yep.
just like standard. And like they'll start off with a question like, "Tell me about you.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Oh my
What do you
god.
stand for?" And I'm just like, really? Come on. Like,
You just know off the bat that it's gonna be terrible. I've been on
yes.
podcasts like that before, and I might have cursed, and they're like, "Oh, we don't do that here." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit, I need to figure out how to mask myself to be on this." I went on this podcast years ago. It was a big podcast in the addiction community. And
Yeah.
the host literally printed out questions off of ChatGPT, had them in succession on index cards or cue cards. And if I diverged from like what we were talking about, he could not recover to like have
Oh,
actual
no.
conversation. And I
No.
was like, this is fucking terrible. And this
No.
makes me realize how much better my podcast is
Yes.
than this like very fancy live version. Anyway,
Mhm. No,
Hudson is,
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you there.
yeah, it's just, I want authenticity and I want real conversation. And I think,
Genuine conversation because there's a lot of bullshit out there, and
yep,
people don't realize people see through the bullshit
yes,
easily,
easily.
easily.
Yes. I mean, for us, like small talk is torturous, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I always think about how do allistic or neurotypical people break into these conversations through like this gridlock of 30 fucking questions to get to the actual point. I'm just like, can we just say what we want to
Can we
say?
just say what you want, just say what you
Right.
need, and if it's nothing, we don't have to talk.
Right.
We don't
Yeah.
have to
We
do
don't have to
this.
fill space just
Yes.
being, oh my God. I have a couple of good friends here in town who, like, if I'm really burnt out, but I need that social contact, I'll reach
Mhm,
out to and say, hey, I'm really having a hard time, but I want to go to dinner or grab a drink, but I don't really want to speak. And
mhm.
they'll be like, absolutely, let's do that. So
Yeah, yeah,
having the right people in your life is a wonderful accommodation. Speaking of, Hudson is not the
yeah.
right people in your life. I believe that he is maybe a poltergeist that was sent here from hell to test me, because our last couple of dogs were basset hounds and they're super chill. They
Yeah.
just want to sleep all day. Hudson is not that way. Hudson is a menace. I love him. He's sleeping right now, thankfully. But he's a high sensory animal, and like a lot of barking, a lot of whining, a lot of
Mhm.
neediness. It can be really challenging. I can't tell you how often I ask my Google device on a weekly basis, like, hey Google, how long do Shih Tzus live? And it'll be like, the Shih Tzu lives 15 to 17 years. I'm like, great, Hudson, you're turning 7 this year. That's awesome.
Got another 10 years left.
Right. And if I'm lucky, maybe 15. Like, who knows? I mean, I do love him, but he's a hard animal.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
Google device hears me downstairs and is answering that question. That's scary. But he's a hard animal to love. I think our neighbors, when they see him walking down the streets, are like, fuck, because
Yeah,
he's
here we
so
go.
reactive and he can't help
Yeah,
himself. I like to
yeah.
think if a dog could be autistic, Hudson is that dog. Like, so many sensory sensitivities, so, like, awkward, so uncomfortable, like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I wanna shift gears a little bit to
sure.
talk about your coaching, because you coach other therapists and other entrepreneurs on dealing with things like imposter syndrome and perfectionism, which I think are understated issues that people deal with. Like I deal with imposter syndrome every day. Like I can't tell you, like anytime I get like introduced at an event when people are like, Kai is this, I sit there and I'm like, no, it's so weird for me to think, even though I
Yeah,
am proud of where I am in the
sure.
world today, it's still like I don't know. It's just really awkward for me. And on top of that, I am a perfectionist. Like that
Yep,
is something I've always been. It goes
same.
back to my athletic days when I
Yep,
was in high school, and when I was younger, I played basketball, baseball, and football. And my coaches wanted the best at all times. There was no half-assing
yep.
anything ever. And so I think that's where it came from. But you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and therapists about dealing with these things. What is the most common lie that neurodivergent professionals tell themselves when they're just trying to fit into this neurotypical world that we live in?
Great question. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I like to try to
Yeah.
do everything through imperfect action now, where I'm like,
Mhm.
build the plane as you fly it is always gonna get the best results for me.
Mm.
Because there are too many things in my life that I have tabled or shelved because I
Yeah.
convinced myself, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, someone else is already doing it. Why would anyone listen? Like all the internal like core belief dialogue bullshit. Like,
Mhm.
so I started realizing a couple of years ago that I shift away from imposter syndrome and talk more about self doubt. I think
Mm.
imposter syndrome, to me, from a lot of conversations I've had, especially with people who are marginalized in any form or fashion, feels very like colonialist based of like, if society tells black and brown and queer and trans people you're not as good,
Uh-huh.
or women as well, you're not as good, we just let you be here in this room, then of course that narrative is going to grow exponentially. So I think we have to deconstruct that a bit when we're talking about it. But
Uh-huh.
in terms of perfectionism and self doubt, I think it's normal to feel nervous. I think it's normal to have doubt. And I believe wholeheartedly that self doubt and humility kind of go hand in hand, two sides of the same coin. Like you're talking
Yeah.
about when you get introduced, you've done some amazing things. We should feel proud of the things we do. My reaction is often to be like, that feels gross.
Yeah.
That humility and that humbleness, though, keep us more relatable, in my opinion, because
Mhm.
if we're willing to talk about, well, I feel this way on
Mhm.
stage in front of people or on podcasts in front of people, it helps normalize the human experience, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I really just talk about like self-doubt should be there, but we should do it anyway because life is way too short and unpredictable. And we need to make the most of the time that we have. And if you have these goals, but that internal dialogue is saying you're not good enough, it's too weird, it's too creative, like it's too outside of the box. Those are the things that we should be pursuing. And my mindset is always like put it into the world. Get it out of your head and put it into the world through action because that's where ADHDers and AuDHDers really do well is in that movement, in that time of like action oriented flexibility. That's where we can drop into flow. And when we drop into flow, I mean, the hyper focus that takes over,
Oh man.
you know, the feeling like it feels exhilarating.
If anything were a superpower, like
Yes.
that would be mine.
If
If
I
it
could
were
bottle that and we could sell it,
man.
people are always like, how do you get to this place? I'm like, yo, flow comes over me, monotropic focus comes over
Oh
for 5
man.
hours. I complete an enormous amount.
You
But
do
the other
6
side of the
months of
coin is
work in like 2 hours. Yeah.
exactly. Then the crash afterwards,
Oh man, yeah, that's the worst part. But yes.
and that feeling is fleeting.
Yeah,
My good
yeah.
friend, Dr. Megan Neff, who I co-host Divergent Conversations with, talks about this all the time. There's a grief in flow, and that's what I would say to neurodivergent entrepreneurs of like, we know that resource is not indefinite. We know it's gonna come to an end and how good it feels to be in it. And
Mm,
I think we try so hard to stay in it when it's over us that we can start to neglect parts of ourself in that moment.
yeah.
And then that crash that comes afterwards leaves you like feeling significantly more depleted than when you were in that creative mode. And you try desperately to get it back. You change your environment, you go on vacation, you work out of a coffee shop for a week, like you do all of the things. And we have to kind of trust our intuition more as neurodivergent entrepreneurs, especially
Mhm.
autistic and ADHDers, of like trust the energy waves, let them ebb and flow, and like truly let them come to you when they're meant to be. And we cannot force creativity.
Yes, absolutely. I want to talk about the other side of the coin here, which is accountability, because that's
Yep.
another thing that I talk a lot about. Like anytime that you'll see me talking about ADHD or anything or anxiety, depression, I always bring up accountability because I think that these diagnoses are a reason; they're not an excuse.
Yep.
Another very unpopular opinion
I
that I
yeah.
have, and so not a lot of people are about that, but it's real. Like none of these things are excuses. Like it's okay to feel the way that you feel about it.
Yep.
But now what are you going to do about it? Right.
Exactly.
But the problem, the actual problem, I think, is with accountability is it's really hard with our brain chemistry
Yep.
because it's actively working against us. It's hard for us to take healthy accountability without punishing ourselves for biological symptoms. How do you think people can find a way to differentiate healthy accountability and self punishment for what is happening to their body?
Yeah, it's a great question because I certainly deal with that as well. I think having good supports in place, having the right friend group, having accountability partnerships is really, really important. If you have the right therapist, it's also super crucial. My therapist calls me out on my shit all the time about this stuff. She's like,
Mhm.
okay, where have all these accolades and achievements gotten you? Was it worth it? Like, was the juice worth the squeeze? And the answer was like, no. And that was quite shocking to me. But having people that I can bounce ideas off of or talk about these struggles with openly and candidly is so helpful because when you're isolated and alone in it, it really does feel like you're the only person who's struggling or suffering in this way.
Yes.
And I think that accountability comes through community building too, and having the right people in your corner who are not only going to like be an echo chamber. You don't want that. You don't want like cheerleader all the time, but I need people in my life who will keep it real with me too. And who are like, listen, you were talking about burnout and now you're messaging me about starting an online summit. Like we should not be doing this, right? Like those are the people that you need in your life because you do need to have something to fall back on. Otherwise, it can be quite self-destructive in a lot of ways, and you can blame yourself for that. When in reality, if we're ADHDers and we have interest-based nervous systems and something feels exciting, I mean, it's probably going to light us up quite a bit, even when we're
Yeah,
struggling, and maybe
absolutely.
even help us overlook how much we're struggling. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we talked a lot about the things that you have struggled with and all of that. Knowing all of this stuff now and the future projects that you have going on and the retreats and the events and all of these things, do you have systems in place now to protect yourself and protect your peace and prevent some of the massive sensory overload that we were talking about before. Do you have systems in place for that for you?
I started laughing because I'm like, I'm the least systemized person. It makes no sense for my brain because like autism wants the systems. ADHD is like, let's just see where it goes.
Yeah.
I have a very good online business manager who helps me kind of stay organized and accountable to things. And then also, I have massively over the last year and a half, maybe two, like cleared out my life and shrunk it pretty drastically because I went from doing 6 to 8 retreats or conferences a year now to doing one.
Mm.
And I'm saying no to significantly more that comes my way. And I think that can feel really hard. You can get into like comparison mindset. You can get into FOMO of like missing out. And you should, like, I should be doing this. I should be saying yes. Whenever that comes over me, I try to like take a beat on it, take a day or two to really think like, do you actually have the energy for the thing that you are committing to? And I have like a tiered system in my brain and I've created a doc for it as well. It's kind of color coded. Green is like, hell yes, we're going to move on this. It feels exciting. It feels aligned. We have the energy. Great. Yellow is more like, yeah, we could do it. We're not as excited and it's going to take a little bit more of a little more work. Maybe we're going to have to outsource for this. Red is like, no, this is not a good idea for right now. And the right now is a really clear, important distinction because if I say no forever, my ADHD side will be like, we're going to figure out a way.
Yeah.
So I can't allow for that breathing room. It has to be, this is just not the right season of life for this right now. We can come back to this at a different time. And I've really had to work hard because even as much as I've cleared off my schedule and my calendar, and as much as it's like been painful to watch friend groups go off and do all of these things together while I'm sitting at home, I have to prioritize my mental and physical health. And if I
Yes.
continue to push, I don't know what the next collapse looks like. I'm already in the thick of a 2+ year burnout here with not a lot of wiggle room to get out of it. And if I keep pushing, that might be, the remainder of the next couple of years or my life. I just can't allow for that to happen. So it's taken a lot of those lessons along the way of being like, maybe I can outthink this. Maybe I can get creative with this. I just have to live a simpler life with less demands. And that can be challenging because I think the ADHD side feels very restless, especially when the autistic side's like, I need rest. I need recovery. We're in pain. We're exhausted. I just want to lay on the couch. ADHD is like, this is fucking boring. Like, we need something to do. This is not stimulating. And I don't want the depression to creep in. I think that's what ADHD is always worried about is like, depression is looming if we're not moving.
If you're not moving, if you're not being productive, if you're not checking off those boxes every day.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it all comes back to what we were saying, right? Like with capitalism too. And I can't tell you all enough how hard it is to work through and deconstruct the narrative and core belief that your self-worth is directly correlated and connected to your achievement and productivity. And I just want to reiterate that it is absolutely not true. And if you continue to move in that direction, it will ultimately destroy you or you will give up parts of yourself that you can't get back.
Yeah. You know what I do, what I started doing over the past year, because I used to go through my life like judging the success of my day based off of how many boxes I checked.
Yep.
Now I still have boxes that I would love to check, but at the end of the day, I ask myself, did I give it everything that I had today?
Yeah.
Whether I checked off one box or 15. Did
Yeah.
I give it everything that I had today? If the answer is yes, that's a win.
Yes.
That's a win, 100%, because we can't judge our success based off of how many boxes we check because that's not giving yourself any grace. Every day is different. Every situation is different. Every project is different. There's so much that comes with it. Patrick, I want to play a little game with you. It's called This or That. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you two choices of things. You can choose one or neither or both. It's not deep, I promise. And just get whatever first pops into your head. All right.
Okay.
All right, here we go. First one. A coffee from a local shop or a giant cold ice brew at home.
Coffee from a local shop.
There's a wonderful, beautiful coffee, like small coffee shop right across the street from where I live. And I'm there almost every day. I love it. I love small coffee shops. Like,
we could have a whole conversation about this. And for me, it's not just about people say, well, you could save money or you could do this at home. This would be so much easier. Some of it is about like routine. Some of it is about social contact, simply going into the shop, seeing the barista that ordering a coffee. Hey, how's your day? Great. Okay. Yep. It's just enough for me on a day where I might spend a lot of time alone. and it
Yeah, it's
feels
usually a controlled environment. It's
exactly.
usually like there is a hustle and bustle there, but it's not the same as like a busy restaurant or bar. Like
Yep,
there's like the sounds, but most of the people that are there, they're either like working or having
yep,
small conversations. And on top of that, I always say this because I'm a major introvert, and people like
same.
don't believe me when I say that. They're like, "But you talk to people." I'm like, "Introverts do talk to people."
Right.
um, but what I say is that I like being around people. Sometimes I just don't like being with people.
Yes, exactly that.
You
Sometimes we
know?
need that social contact and that social energy.
Yes.
Think about I do a lot of solo travel, and I'll go to a
Same.
bar or a pub, and I'll just sit there. And that is enough socializing and contact for me to
Yeah.
be in a place where other people are in proximity instead of just being alone in
Yes.
my rental or my home. And even if I don't speak a single word, it's still
Yep.
proximity.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Second one, a Lord of the Rings marathon
Yes.
or an
Win.
Anthony Bourdain yeah, or an
Oh, man. Okay. I almost wanna say both, but I'm not going to say both because I love Lord of the Rings that much that, like,
yeah.
as much as Bourdain is secondary, Lord of the Rings always wins. Lord of the Rings
Mhm.
is comfort, it's regulating, it's home. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
winner, but it's hard.
Yes. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm not making these easy. Some of them are really easy, but here we go. Next one. Hanging out with a red panda or hanging out with the with 10 shih tzu.
Oh my god. Red panda for sure. 10 Shih Tzus, although the pictures look adorable, is a nightmare. I just
Yeah.
know it in my soul. My wife's like, "Let's get 2 more." I'm like, "Fuck no, I'm not getting any
You're
of
like,
them."
absolutely not.
Red panda all day.
Recording a podcast or giving a TEDx talk.
Ooh, podcasting, I think, but it's
Yeah.
tough.
Mhm.
TEDx was a cool accomplishment. I didn't like the way I had to push myself and prepare.
Mm.
I don't like the memorization and scripting and
Yeah.
verbatim of it. I would rather just see where things go. So, yeah,
Yeah.
podcast.
You know what's helped me? I was very lucky because I took I used to do improv in high school and college. So I did
Mhm.
it for like 10 years. And so that taught me everything I need to know about thinking quick on my feet. And so I'm happy that I did that because I've carried those skills with me whenever I'm
Yeah,
doing any sort of live presentation where
yep,
if I do lose what I'm talking about, I take so much pride in the fact that I'm very quick on my feet.
yeah.
Very
That's a
quick on my
huge
feet. So,
set.
yeah.
And same, like, when I do talks in front of conferences or groups, I usually am talking based on the energy that I am picking up on
Yes.
in the room.
That's a
When I
good
did my
speaker.
TEDx, you just see this clock ticking down from 16 minutes, and you have to remember, like, 8 pages of lines, and I
Yeah.
fucked up on stage, and I was like, "Oh, I just fucked that up. I missed that line," and everyone just started clapping, and I was like, "Ooh, that felt good."
Yeah.
But it was tough. It was
Yeah.
a very, very tough experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Last one. A humid summer day. I already know the answer to this one. A humid summer day in Asheville or freezing winter night.
Freezing winter night, all
Yeah, I
day,
figured.
every day, yeah.
I figured. I'll live vicariously through you for
Go
that
in
one.
Maryland in July, and, like, that's something I'm most looking forward is that
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. For anybody that's listening that wants to follow you or learn more about you and all of that, where can they go?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. This was
Yeah,
fun.
man.
I have a podcast called All Things Private Practice, but it's transitioning to the Neurodivergent Entrepreneur podcast. You can follow me on all those platforms. Instagram's probably where I'm the most active. It's just my name, Patrick.Casale. You can go to my website, allthingspractice.com. I don't know. I think there's more. That's fine.
I'll definitely have links to all of those things in the show notes. So all you have to do is click and go check out Patrick, and I think you're going to enjoy. I mean, unless you don't like cursing, then maybe
Yes.
you might want to skip it, or just like get help, like get the help that he's offering, and then just like you know, it
Take
might be
what
worth it.
works for you, leave the rest. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's wild. Parasocial
The it might
relationships
be
in
good to
here,
have
like,
a F-bomb every now and then, like it might help your life.
might
You
help
never
your
know.
life. Might feel
Yeah.
good.
I always ask my guests this one last question. If there's one thing you want the audience to take away from this conversation today, what is that one thing?
For those of you who are just feeling really isolated and alone and maybe like an alien, that's what is always said by autistic people. Just know that you're not. And there are lots of people out there who get it and that there's nothing wrong with you at all. If you are struggling with any of the things we talked about today, it's actually quite normal and part of the human experience. And I just want you to know that you have people in your corner, you have resources available, you have lots of reasons to continue to move forward and to push forward through what you're struggling with. So just don't give up on yourself.
Love it. Patrick, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, my friend.
Thanks, Kai. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. We started this episode talking about a world that measures your worth by your output. Patrick lived that truth so completely that his body eventually made the decision his brain wouldn't. And the thing that stayed with me the most from this conversation is not a strategy or a system. It's something that he said about the grief that comes after a late diagnosis. The grief for that younger version of yourself who struggled for decades without a name for any of it. And then the relief of finally understanding why. That paradox, it hits somewhere real for me. If you want to keep going deeper with Patrick, check out his podcasts, his platforms, his website, all of that. It's a great first step into learning more about him and how he can help you. He's a good man. I like him a lot. All of those links for him are in the show notes of this podcast episode. And if you're not already subscribed, please leave a review on whatever platform that you're listening on or watching on right now. That would mean the world to me. Also, make sure that you're following me at The Vibe with Kai on all of your favorite social media platforms. And make sure you visit thevibewithkai.com for my blog, my ADHD store, my email list, and all of the ways to subscribe for exclusive neurodivergent content that you won't find anywhere else. And it's only $5 a month. Those links are in the show notes as well. With that said, my friends, thank you so much for watching and for listening. As always, much love, good vibes. I'll catch you next time. Bye.